Hi, everyone. This is Mike with episode 35 of Getting Everyone Moving, brought to you by Palms of Pine Parasports. Today, we have Steve Everett of USA Power Soccer. Hey, Steve.
Hey, how's it going, Mike? Nice
All
to
right.
see you.
Good to see you. All right, Steve. So tell us how you got involved with Power Soccer.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure if you know, but Mike, I think we've talked in the past, but I used to be a wheelchair tennis player, traveled the world doing that for many, many years. Started in the early '80s and moved on up and played in the quad divisions and represented my country in various international competitions. And after 21 years of competing, I took a break. I have two children. They started growing up and wanted to be involved as a dad and, in their activities. And after a few years of helping them with their sports and their other endeavors, the itch was always there to be competitive again. It's kind of in my DNA. And so a fellow tennis player who retired as well had started playing power soccer. And he said, "Hey, you got to come check this out. It's really, I think it's right up your alley. I know how competitive you are, and it'd just be one of those fun things for you to check out." So I didn't have really any huge expectations. I just kind of went out there and looked, and and as soon as I seen it, I was like, oh man, I gotta give this a shot. And luckily, this team was in Glendale. They're not too far from where I live. I live in Lakewood and right by Long Beach. And so I went to the tryout, and they let me sit in one of the chairs that were pretty much already equipped for the sport. And I tell you what, the first time I kicked the ball, I was like, oh man. And I'm a huge wheelchair basketball fan and basketball in general. Coached high school basketball. I love watching basketball. And because this sport is played on a court, I just felt like I was at home. There's a lot of team concepts behind it. So, yeah. And that was in 2010. And so I've been, going at it ever since. I'm not one of these guys that can kind of just put my toes in and just kind of do it recreational. I have to dive right in and get all absorbed into it. And that's exactly what I did.
So are the chairs different than a power chair that you would use, on a daily basis?
Yeah. In the early years, they were a daily based chair. Usually a lot of people had a secondary chair they used for their sport. And there was a lot of garage mechanics around, let's just say, tweaking their chairs. And we had a standard, what we call as a foot guard. And that's what we use to kick the ball with. It's a 13-inch soccer ball, so it's a little bit bigger than, the normal soccer ball. What ended up happening was there were a group in Minnesota called the Power Soccer Shop. And they took ideas and thoughts. And I remember them picking my brain because I was, world-class athlete in tennis, and knowing what Invacare had did with my chair to help me compete. I was a sponsored athlete. They just wanted like the perception or the perspective from the end user. And there's a lot of people that gave input, and they came up with a chair called the Strike Force. And that just completely turned the sport upside down. I mean, it is really unbelievable. If you watch any older versions of games in everyday chairs to where it is now, it's like night and day.
So who can play power soccer? And talk about classification, please.
Yeah, currently, right now here in the United States, we don't have classification that we have implemented. It is for our international team. Our Team USA has to follow international guidelines and classification. But anybody with a physical disability is eligible to play power soccer right now in the U.S. And one of the reasons why that is because we're trying to grow the sport. This will kind of give you just a brief little idea. we have had 3 World Cups. The first one starting in 2007, the next one in 2011, and the last one in 2017. We won the first 2, and we're in the finals of the 2017 one. But yet, this is still a very unknown sport. So we're trying to gather and get more people involved. As far as the classification goes, there is an international, basically our international federation, which is called FIFA, FIFA, almost like FIFA of the world game, and they are international government of our sport, and they have a classification system because we're trying to get into the Paralympics. That's an incredibly big part for us. And in order to do that, we need to, as countries around the world and as an international organization, have to have a classification process. They have some medical experts that have put together a pretty thorough classification. There's 2 classifications. It's class 1 or class 2. And a class 2 is one with more physical abilities. I can have trunk mobility. I can turn my head left to right. I maybe have some leg strength. It could be some of that. Someone who's a class 1 might have no movement of the head, very weak in the arms, no trunk, so forth and so on. How that all ties up into a bow is that we play 4 versus 4, and you're allowed in those 4 to have a max total of 6 points on the court. So that's usually 2 class 1s and 2 class 2s. And that's how it works. Very similar to rugby or basketball, I guess, in some way.
Okay. I recently, I was telling you, I just watched this movie called Kick, Japanese movie. And I was amazed by the strategy that goes into this game. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, so we have some rules that kind of limit it from becoming bumper cars, let's just say. And it's a 2-on-1 rule. And basically, you have 10 feet radius, let's just say, and 2 offensive people with the ball cannot be within the 10 meters of each other, with a defender also nearby within that. So it forces the game to be a 1 versus 1 game when you have the ball. Now, if I get beat and that guy steals the ball and goes the other way, then somebody else of another teammate can jump in and go versus him, but I got to get out of that 10-foot radius. And the only time that you are eligible to be next to one of your teammates, both offense and defense, would be in the goal box. A goalkeeper and a second defender can be as close as they want as long as they're in that goal box. Once the goalkeeper goes out of that box, he's no longer eligible, or basically he's no longer protected by that rule of being close. The strategy has become incredibly passing. It's a wide open game because of that. And a lot of the teams that are the better teams throughout the world and in the country are the ones that actually have a V formation that they've mastered. They have a left wing up top, they have a right wing up top, and they have the center back. So it looks like a triangle. And as long as they try to keep that triangle and move the ball, it's amazing. Now you got your keeper behind you. There's also things that are changing now. Thanks to England, you'll see a lot more teams playing all 4 players up. Even though the goalkeeper has the vest on, now they're forcing the action. They're putting pressure, almost like in wheelchair basketball where you put a full court press on somebody. It's that. And it's just an exciting way of playing the game. And you're really, you're countering and defensively trying to set up and take positions and angles away, playing a lot of passing lanes and stuff like that. So I tell you what, it's amazing. The majority of the goals are scored from corner kicks, just like in able-body sport. And so, and with these new chairs, the rebound game is a big thing. What I mean by that is if somebody blasts the ball at the goal and he blocks it, the rebound's going to pop out. And if you're in the right position, you can knock it right back in. So there's a lot of setup that way.
So how many teams or how many places is power soccer played, in the United States? Is it more focused in the West, the Northwest, the South?
We're trying to grow throughout all of the United States, and that's pretty much a big part of what my goal is as leader of the organization. Currently, we have just under 70 teams, about 67, 68 is what we average teams throughout the nation. There is a big group of them in the East Coast. There's Midwest teams. And the West Coast too, as well. And so, there's a lot. I would say that if you want to say the hotbed of power soccer is probably in the state of Indiana. They have a lot of teams and high-level teams. They've grown very good. And we here on the West Coast are wanting to change that. we want to be super competitive with those guys as well. And we have some good teams out here on the West Coast that are, knocking on that door to try to be one of the top teams in the country.
So what is USA Power Soccer? What are you actually doing, to spread the game, to create more awareness? I mean, it's with power soccer, it's with wheelchair basketball, it's with all adaptive sports. I mean, how do you do it?
Yeah. So, we're focusing right now on a lot of clinics, and that's kind of a standard thing, but I think that and demos. What I've learned right now is, and I kind of learned this back in my tennis days. I was very good friends with Brad Parks, and everybody knows he's the guy that started wheelchair tennis. And one of the discussions Brad and I had is how did you get this going? And it was very interesting. He said, I was always a good athlete. I always wanted to compete, and he competed in track and field, wheelchair racing, basically. And so most of those events are at a college or a university or a high school or some a track facility. And guess what's also in that facility? Tennis courts. And he always wanted to start tennis. So lots of times he would contact the local, organizer and say, hey, look, during some free time, do you guys mind if I promote people coming out and trying wheelchair tennis, And he had some rackets and some tennis balls, and he just got people to do some things and try it, and it ignited. It just kind of took off from there. So similar to that, one of my goals, of course, after the pandemic it allows us to do so, would be to really maybe piggyback on some of these other sports and maybe like quad rugby. Look, we have a lot of quad rugby athletes who are super competitive and they travel the world. And guess what? At the end of their career, it's usually one of the things is their body just can't handle what they used to, and it's time. Well, guess what? You can still be competitive. You can stay on that edge and fulfill those goals by getting in a power chair and still playing a team sport that's highly, highly competitive. So, those are just some of the things that we're doing. We just actually have a partnership with our very first ambassador of power soccer. And this gentleman's name is Sebastian Leggett. He plays for the LA Galaxy. He's also on the U.S. men's national team. And I did a demo one day, and he came out and said, hey, I really, I like this. I want to be more involved. And over the years, our relationship has grown and grown and grown. And finally, it's gotten to the point where he says, hey, look, I just not want to just help. I want to really be a part of this. So we just recently came to terms and partnered up. And so, I think that's part of it, building the bridge between the able-bodied sport and the adaptive sport is huge. So those are just a few of the things that we're doing.
Yeah, that's so terrific. Um, the chairs, I mean, how would someone get one? And aren't they kind of expensive, I would think?
They are. Yeah, they're very expensive. The Power Soccer Shop does a great job of trying to work with people. And they know that sometimes there's fundraising and things that need to be done. We've had a lot of people apply for, with CAF, Challenge Athletes Foundation, to get some equipment. And, depending on your need as far as the chair goes, and they can range somewhere between sometimes $8,000 or $9,000. So it's an expensive piece of equipment, but it's when people ask me what it relates to, how I can relate it to like somebody in an able-bodied world, I would say this: it would be like going out on the field playing soccer in just your everyday tennis shoes, and you're slipping all over the grass and everything, and then putting on cleats and going, oh man, this is a whole different world here. And that's pretty much what it is, the difference between how we started and where the higher level competition and the equipment that's available. And we don't want to totally make it about that chair. I think that's not for everybody. I think a good starting point is still having everyday chairs that are adaptable. And Power Soccer Shop has equipment for every power chair you can think of to help you get a guard on and get the brackets and the equipment, so you can start and see where you go from there. And then, there are used strike forces that are out there. You just, got to look for them and those kind of things too. But yeah, that's a challenge. But I think everybody that gets the chair goes, it was well worth it.
I have to try it. Oh, I have to try it. Steve,
yes.
So, you're someone, you've accomplished a lot in your life. I don't think you've let anything kind of stop you. What kind of support did you have, growing up, and what drives you internally, to just say, don't tell me I can't, because you're wrong. I can, obviously.
Right. Well, I think it started with my parents, no doubt. They were always, saying to me, again, like a lot of parents say, you can accomplish whatever you put your mind to and that kind of stuff. I think they realized, and they were very excited about, me finding out and exploring where my life was going to lead me. But they didn't know how far I was going to take it, let's just say. And I think, here's the biggest thing. I always ask, people ask me that, I'm older now, I have a family, I'm married, and, I have a career, all those kinds of things. What was it like being a kid, and what do you think that helped you the most? And I would have to say this: I think it's when you fail at something, you fall, we'll just say you take a stumble. My parents were always there, but they were never going to lift me back up unless they absolutely had to. The struggle is where you learn, and it builds the character, and it gives you the perseverance to move forward. And I think that's where it all came down to. Internally, I had this fire in me. I was a sports fanatic. I would just sit as a young boy, watch every sport I could on TV and go, I wish one day I could play that, or I could do that. Always being on the outside looking in, until wheelchair tennis came along. And so I really think that, finally finding like wheelchair tennis, it lit a fire in my belly like no other. Then when I reached the milestone of winning the U.S. Open and being the #1 player in the world, and also being the first person in a power chair to even play wheelchair tennis. Those kinds of things were, I didn't realize I was doing what I was doing. All I was doing was playing. I was competing. I remember a reporter one time asking me, what does it feel like to play wheelchair tennis? And I thought that was the most awkward question somebody could ask. And so my smart aleck voice pretty much kicked in. I say, well, you know what? You really want to know what it feels like? And he kind of said, yeah. I said, well, okay, here's what it feels like. I said, I get on the court and I look across the net and I see a guy in a wheelchair on the other side of the net. And I think, if I can't hit this tennis ball past a guy in a wheelchair, what the heck am I doing out here? And he just kind of laughed. At first he was, he just kind of shocked and laughed a little bit at the same time. And, it's just, that's just what it was. That's what it was for me. And, I think as I've gotten older, I've learned a lot more about where I am in my life now. When you're a young person and you're striving to be the best, and there's ranking points and all this stuff, you're a little more self-serving. Your focus is on me a little bit more. And as I've gotten older and I've done that, I realized the real beauty of this all is the focus on others, sharing what I've done, sharing, encouraging people and wanting people to be better than me. I was like, I always hear people, oh man, I want to be as good as you. No. I want you to be better than me. That's kind of one of those things. And I think it's, I've learned from those legends in our sports, like the Randy Snows of the world and the, people that have done so much, David Hall, Brad Parks. I mean, and even the ones that have been playing power soccer, there's so many out there that have left a legacy. And, I'm excited to be able to help everybody love the sport that I love so much right now. So, yeah.
Someone brought up in one of the other podcasts, I mean, we were talking about, she was a wheelchair tennis player. She does fashion now. But we were talking about, how, I mean, you obviously, her, others, you're elite athletes. And that's what you are. You may have to use a chair for mobility, whatever, but you're still an elite athlete. So, how do you get the public to really understand that, and go, oh, I feel so bad for this person because,
Right.
An able-bodied person, let me try to get in a wheelchair and play tennis, forget it. I'm, so how do you get people to understand that,
I think it's a tough, that's something I've dealt with all my athletic career.
Yeah.
I remember being in a class at Cal State Long Beach, and the professor was teaching theory of sport or something, I think it was. And, the topic became, they knew I was a wheelchair tennis player, and we started talking about things. And I said, how do we change the perception of the media and to realize that we are, like you said, elite athletes. I said, I'm kind of tired of seeing every time people would say to me, hey, I seen you in the paper today. I seen it. Oh yeah, I seen that you did this in tennis, and and I would be thankful and gracious about it. But it was funny to me until I really had to stand up for myself and really kind of educate everybody I'm in contact with. Those articles were always in the human interest section, never in the sports page.
Yeah.
And that would drive me nuts. So when I would talk to reporters, I would always say, you can change the world of my world of athletes. And, Sports and Spokes was our Sports Illustrated, right? That was a magazine that it was great. If you were on the cover or you were in a big article on Sports and Spokes, you would be like, oh, this is great, right? But that's great in your own little world, but what about the rest of the world? So I think I think there becomes an opportunity for us to really push the envelope. And I think one of the things is people got to be in our shoes to actually see what we're about. And I think getting, like, anytime I try to do one-on-one interviews or anything, I want them in my chair. I want them to see what it's like to kick the ball. And I want them to see what goes into it, what the training is like. The mental part of sports is huge, whether you're on your feet or you're not. So how do I prepare mentally? And so I really think that's just one thing that's always up to us as athletes to, I want to say, demand excellence from those that are promoting our sports and writing articles on various teams and athletes. I think that's where it starts. So,
Steve, what do you say to kids who maybe haven't tried adaptive sports yet, but and maybe feel a bit depressed, like I can't do much? I mean, how do you go about motivating, especially kids?
Yeah, I think the biggest part is fear. I mean, fear is the biggest motivator in the world. Fear of failure, fear of success, it can even be, and I think, for children, I think it starts with the parents really assuring them that they need to try that. And the parents got to be willing to allow that to happen too as well. And I think here's the thing. Wheelchair sports, adaptive sports, all of the above, whatever we want to call it, it allows a social aspect like no other. I can relate to other people my age. Maybe somebody's a little bit older. Maybe they're my counselor, and I watch how they transfer in and out of their regular chair to their competition chair. I go, wow, that's interesting. I mean, it could be the littlest things. I'll tell you a story. I played, or I didn't play. I coached quad rugby, and it's in the early pioneer days of quad rugby. We had a player who actually struggled with transfers, and he was a little worried about, like, if I fall out of my chair, how am I going to get back in? And we assured him, it's no big deal. We're going to work. So here we are in this quad rugby practice. I'm screaming and yelling like usual as a coach would, shouting orders and having fun with them, but still kind of drilling them and making them work hard. And this guy gets cracked in his chair, and all of a sudden he flops over. And now he's got this deer in the headlights look. Like, okay, now how am I going to get back in this thing? So he was fine when he hit the ground. Of course, luckily mom and dad weren't there to run out and they'd probably try to rescue the day. But we had therapists on at practice and other coaches. And he says, oh man, I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to get back in this chair. Every player on that team purposely fell out of their chair. So now I got quads all over the court with chair pieces everywhere. I mean, their chair, it's everywhere. And they're all showing them how they get in their chair. And you can't teach that. I mean, that's just a life lesson. And that guy went on to be a two-sport Paralympian. He's an author. He's one of my best friends. He was in my wedding, and his name's Brent Poppin. And I'll never forget that. He is, that moment kind of changed him a little bit. And so he was able to get in his chair, and he figured things out. And it was great. It was a great, great moment. So one that I'll never forget.
Yeah, that's an incredible story. That's beautiful. Just amazing. Mm-hmm. So we're getting towards the end of our interview. Steve, what are some final words that you'd like to leave the listening audience with?
Well, I just say when it comes to adaptive sports, it changed my life. It changed my world. It changed my perspective, my confidence. It's a huge part of who I become. And I think for anybody who's never tried it, look, we're not asking you to be the next world champion or whatever. You never know. It might hit you in the side of the head and you go, ooh, wow, I think I could do this and I could represent my country and all that. Or just, I just want something to do that's going to keep my body going, that's going to keep me healthy. I want to interact with people that are a lot like me, and learn from them and learn from each other. And I think for parents, it's just a great opportunity for you to watch your children shine. And I think it's just one of the greatest gifts that God has given us is adaptive sports. And I can't say enough about it. I hope everybody at least gives things a try, whatever it is, whatever it is. I'd like you to come to Power Soccer, but that's me being a little greedy here, but that's okay. You know what? And your program is great. And I know that's what you're trying to do, is spread the love of wheelchair sports and adaptive sports in general. And, so I hope to see people out there. Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Steve. Terrific interview. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Mike. And look forward to seeing you out there soon.
Yeah, great.